The sun burned the plains, but it wasn't the heat that made him fear the day. A lone rancher rode through the empty desert, carrying only a half-empty canteen and a secret he couldn't shake. Somewhere in the dust, a young Apache girl was waiting. She was lost, alone, and maybe the key to something bigger than either of them could imagine. Would he save her, or would the West take them both? The horizon blazed with a cruel orange glare as Silas urged his horse forward. Dust swirled in small whirlwinds, whispering warnings through the skeletal remains of abandoned settlements. The West was unforgiving, a land that demanded more than courage. It demanded understanding, patience, and sometimes impossible luck. Days earlier, Silas had stumbled upon her, a small frame shivering beneath a tattered blanket, eyes wide with fear and hunger. She was alone, or so it seemed, and the desert had already begun to claim her strength. Silas's canteen was nearly empty, yet he offered what little water he had. The girl drank greedily, her gratitude unspoken but visible in the faint sparkle in her eyes. In that moment, Silas felt something shift, something beyond simple charity. By nightfall, she vanished. He searched dry washes, called her name into the silence, but only the wind answered. Alone under the skeletal branches of a mesquite tree, he felt the weight of the desert pressing in on him. Stars shone cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of man and child alike. Then came the rumble. Not thunder, this was something different. Shapes emerged on the horizon. Horses, dozens of them, moving with purpose and discipline. Among them, she appeared. Aita, the girl he had saved, now standing tall, eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. Behind her, the rest of her tribe approached. The elder rode forward, skin weathered and lined by decades of sun and hardship. His gaze pierced Silas, weighing him, measuring him, questioning his worth. Words were spoken in a tongue Silas could not understand, yet meaning was clear. Gratitude, respect, and perhaps an unspoken promise of trust. Days turned into weeks as Silas learned their ways. Aita taught him how to listen to the desert, the subtle signs of life, of danger, of survival. She moved with grace, hunted with precision, and guided him through a land that offered no mercy. He realized then that a small act of kindness, the water he had shared, had created a bond bridging two worlds that should never have met. But danger never slept in the West. Bandits roamed the hills, drawn by whispers of wealth or weakness. One night, gunfire shattered the calm. Shadows danced along canyon walls. Silas's heart pounded, but beside him, Aita was calm, steady, her movements decisive. Courage was not the absence of fear, she seemed to say. It was surviving it, together. The dawn revealed empty trails where the bandits had been, leaving only the echo of a threat in the wind. Silas understood something vital. The West would take, but it could also give. Life in this desert demanded connection, understanding, and trust. And sometimes, the smallest gestures, like offering water, could ripple into miracles. He watched Aita disappear into the morning haze, knowing survival alone was never enough. Life demanded courage, trust, and unexpected bonds. The desert had taken much from him, but in return, it had given hope, and perhaps a chance at something larger than himself. The desert had a way of teaching lessons in whispers and gunfire, and Silas had learned to listen carefully. Days bled into nights, the sun carving the land into shadows and heat that made even the hardiest horses falter. Aita moved like the wind, silent and precise, guiding Silas through hidden trails he would have never noticed alone. Every morning he watched the horizon, expecting trouble, knowing that the West demanded more than courage. It demanded alertness, cunning, and, sometimes, the impossible. One evening, as the red sun dipped behind jagged cliffs, a strange presence appeared on the edge of their camp. Smoke curling from the distant hills, black and unnatural against the fading sky. Silas's heart tightened. Bandits? Hunters? Or something worse? He whispered to Aida, whose eyes had already scanned the terrain, sharp and unyielding. She shook her head slowly, signaling him to remain calm but ready. The night stretched long, each sound amplified, the rustle of a lizard in the sand, the distant howl of a coyote, the faint whisper of wind over stones. When the riders finally arrived, they were not what Silas expected. A group of bounty hunters, their eyes hard, faces scarred, horses snorting under the tension. They circled the camp, observing, calculating. One of them stepped forward, voice rough like gravel, asking for something Silas could not yet comprehend. Aida's hand rested lightly on the hilt of a knife, her gaze unwavering. Silas felt fear claw at him, but he remembered her lessons. Courage was not absence of fear. It was standing firm despite it. Hours passed in a tense standoff, the desert holding its breath. Finally, the leader of the hunters spoke again, and Aida translated, words that promised danger if Silas refused to comply, words that spoke of old grudges and debts owed for past deeds he barely remembered. Silas clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility pressing down. He realized that this land did not forgive easily. But sometimes mercy could be earned. Trust could be built in moments of peril. Night deepened, stars glinting like cold eyes above, and Silas felt a quiet determination rise within him. The Apache girl had shown him patience, strength, and vision. Now it was his turn to protect, to make choices that would shape not just their lives, but the fate of everyone tied to them. They rode at first light, shadows long across the sand, moving silently toward the mountains where whispers told of water, shelter, and danger alike. The hunters followed at a distance, cautious yet relentless. Silas and Aida navigated hidden ravines, trickling streams, and caves carved by ancient storms. Along the way, Silas began to understand the tribe's wisdom more deeply. The land spoke in signs, and Aida was fluent. She pointed out edible roots, warned of unstable cliffs, and taught him how to read the patterns of birds, clouds, and even the distant howls of coyotes. Every moment was a lesson, every small victory a reassurance that they could survive. But the West is never kind for long. On the third night, a gunshot shattered the calm. The hunters had caught up, and they were ruthless. Silas felt the sting of a bullet graze his shoulder, a sharp reminder of mortality. Aida sprang forward, her movements a blur, taking down a man before he could fire again. Silas watched in awe, his respect for her growing with each passing second. The fight was brutal, chaotic, and terrifying. The desert, silent moments ago, now echoed with cries, gunfire, and the pounding of hooves. Silas realized that survival required more than skill. It required trust, instinct, and an unshakable resolve to protect those who mattered. By dawn, the hunters were gone, leaving only the blood-soaked sand and broken horses. Silas and Aida tended their wounds, their silence heavy with reflection. The desert had tested them, and they had survived. But it was only the beginning. Rumors of gold, of hidden fortunes, and of lawless men traveling the plains reached them in whispered tales from passing travelers. Each story carried warnings. Each warning demanded caution. Silas began to feel the weight of the journey, not just for him but for Aida and her people. Every choice mattered. Every step could be the last. And yet, amidst the danger, there were moments of profound beauty, a hidden oasis where water shimmered like glass, the laughter of Aida as she taught him to track deer, the quiet nights beneath a sky bursting with stars that felt closer than any town he had ever known. Each moment reminded him why he had come, why he had risked everything to help a lost child, and why the West, despite its cruelty, could offer miracles too. They traveled for weeks, each day a delicate balance of survival and strategy. Silas began to notice subtle changes in the land, scars of old battles, markings that told of hidden paths, and natural formations that could serve as shelter or traps. Aida guided him with precision, teaching him the importance of patience, observation, and respect for the land. Together, they became a team, moving almost as one, anticipating dangers before they appeared. Yet the hunters were relentless, shadows that refused to fade. One night, under a crescent moon, they found themselves trapped in a narrow canyon, the cliffs towering above like silent sentinels. Silas's heart raced as he calculated their options. Retreat meant risking exposure. Standing their ground meant facing overwhelming odds. Aida, calm as ever, whispered instructions, her voice steady, confident. They prepared, barricaded, and waited. The tension was unbearable. Hours passed. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the shadows, the hunters emerged, eyes glinting with malice, weapons ready. Silas felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and determination. He knew that surrender was not an option. Aida moved with lethal grace, taking precise actions that minimized risk and maximized their chances. Silas followed, each decision weighted with responsibility and trust. The battle was fierce, the sound of gunfire echoing against the canyon walls, mixing with the cries of men and the pounding of hooves. In the chaos, Silas realized the depth of his bond with Aida. They were no longer just protector and child, they were partners, allies against a world that demanded resilience at every turn. When the dust settled, the hunters were defeated or fled, leaving only the echo of conflict behind. Silas and Aida emerged battered but alive, a quiet understanding passing between them. Survival required courage, cunning, and unwavering trust. As they continued their journey, the landscape changed, rolling hills, hidden valleys, and the distant shimmer of mountains promising safety and uncertainty alike. The West remained dangerous, unforgiving, and unpredictable. But Silas felt something he had never known, a sense of purpose, of connection, and the quiet thrill of knowing that every day survived was a victory against impossible odds. And through it all, Aida's presence was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest lands, bonds could be formed, courage could be found, and miracles, sometimes small, sometimes profound, could bloom in the most unexpected places. The desert stretched endlessly, golden and cruel, as Silas and Aida rode toward the mountains that promised safety yet whispered danger in every gust of wind. Weeks of survival had hardened them, yet each day still carried the sharp bite of uncertainty. The Apache girl had grown in confidence and skill, and Silas felt the weight of his own transformation. He was no longer just a rancher wandering lost lands. He was a protector, a guide, a man who had learned to trust, to survive, and to fight with everything he had. The hunters they had faced before were gone, but whispers on the wind told of new threats: bandits, lawless men seeking gold and vengeance, and the unpredictable cruelty of the land itself. Each morning brought a new horizon of challenges, each night a reminder of mortality, as stars glittered above cold and distant, illuminating the relentless silence of the plains. One evening, as a blood-red sunset set the cliffs ablaze, they stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin, its wood splintered and scorched by fire. Silas approached cautiously, Aita at his side, eyes sharp for movement. Inside, remnants of a hurried departure hinted at a family once living here, now lost to the harshness of the West. The girl's gaze softened, and Silas felt a pang of shared sorrow. Even in survival, there were stories of loss everywhere, unspoken and invisible. As night fell, they camped beside the cabin, fires casting trembling shadows against its walls. Suddenly, the howl of wolves cut through the night, followed by the distinct clatter of hooves approaching rapidly. Silas grabbed his rifle, heart pounding, while Aita drew her knife, calm as ever. From the darkness emerged figures, masked and armed, their eyes gleaming with malice. These were not hunters, not bandits. They were mercenaries, relentless and organized, tracking anyone daring to traverse the desert. The confrontation was immediate and chaotic. Bullets tore through the night, dust and sand rising in clouds, mixing with screams and cries. Silas felt a searing pain in his side, but adrenaline kept him moving, keeping him alive. Aita's movements were a dance of precision and survival, each strike calculated, each dodge deliberate. Despite the overwhelming odds, they fought with synchronized instinct, relying on trust forged in endless trials. Hours passed in a blur of violence and determination, until the last of the mercenaries lay subdued, either fleeing or defeated. Silence returned, broken only by labored breaths and the wind sighing through the scorched cabin. They were battered, wounded yet unbroken, and Silas realized the depth of their resilience. But danger never sleeps in the West, and the trials had only begun. As they continued their journey, rumors of hidden gold in the northern valleys reached their ears. Men traveled these paths, reckless and violent, willing to kill for wealth that was often more illusion than reality. Silas and Aita moved cautiously, learning to read the signs of travelers and predators alike. The broken branches, the scorched earth, the glint of distant metal signaling a rifle barrel. Each moment was a choice between survival and exposure, between fear and courage. Days turned into nights as the mountains loomed closer, their jagged peaks like the teeth of some colossal beast, waiting to swallow the unwary. Silas found himself thinking constantly of the Apache girl, her bravery, her wisdom, her ability to turn fear into strategy. He understood that survival was no longer just about water or food. It was about foresight, trust, and the courage to act when hesitation meant death. On the third week of their trek, a storm descended, a sudden, violent tempest that tore through the canyon, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rattling their bones, and rain turning the trails into rivers of mud and rock. The desert they knew transformed into a treacherous battlefield of slick stones, collapsing cliffs, and relentless torrents. Silas and Aita clung to each other's strengths, navigating the fury of nature with caution and skill. At one point, a flash flood swept through, nearly dragging Silas into its merciless grip. But Aita's quick reflexes saved him, her hands steady, her presence a lifeline in the chaos. Exhausted and soaked, they sought shelter in a rocky overhang, shivering, hearts racing, minds alert for predators that thrived in storms. In that quiet after the storm, Silas realized how fragile life was, yet how remarkable the bonds they had forged could be. The next day brought unexpected discoveries. Hidden caves with ancient paintings, evidence of tribes long gone, and a small oasis providing the water and rest they desperately needed. Here, Ayita revealed secrets of her people's survival techniques, ways to purify water, track animals, and read the patterns of the desert sky. Silas absorbed it all, knowing every lesson could mean life or death in the coming days. But the West was not yet done testing them. Shadows loomed over the horizon, signaling another group of men pursuing their own interests, greedy for gold and blood. Silas and Ayita prepared, setting traps, planning escape routes, and readying weapons. The confrontation that followed was unlike any they had faced. Strategy, stealth, and raw courage collided in a tense, cinematic battle across rocks, canyons, and the sparse vegetation of the mountains. Silas felt his body ache with exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp, driven by the need to protect Ayita, the tribe, and the fragile hope they carried. Amidst the chaos, there were moments of tenderness. Ayita's hand brushing his as she guided him to cover, her whispered instructions, the shared understanding that survival was only meaningful when shared. Hours later, the last of the men were gone, leaving the desert quiet once again. Though scars of battle remained etched into the landscape and their bodies. Silas and Ayita tended to each other's wounds, and in the quiet that followed, they realized how much they had grown, how inseparable their fates had become. As the mountains rose before them, promising both safety and challenge, Silas understood that the West could be cruel and merciless. Yet it also nurtured courage, forged bonds, and revealed miracles to those brave enough to endure. They rode forward, through narrow passes and hidden valleys, through the golden light of sunrise and the long shadows of dusk. Every step a testament to survival, hope, and the enduring strength of trust forged in adversity. In the end, they reached the northern plateau, a land of possibility, of life reclaimed from the harshness of the desert, where water flowed, the land was fertile, and the promise of new beginnings shimmered like the morning sun. Silas looked at Ayita, seeing not just the girl he had saved, but a partner, a teacher, and a friend whose courage had reshaped him. Together, they had survived the cruelty of the West, faced death and violence, yet emerged stronger, bonded, and ready to embrace the future, one day at a time, one miracle at a time, proving that even in the harshest lands, hope, courage, and connection could prevail. The mountains rose like silent guardians as Silas and Ayita pressed forward, their bodies bruised and tired, but their spirits unbroken. The desert behind them fading into memory, yet leaving its lessons etched into their bones. Each morning brought the sharp bite of cold, the crunch of frost underfoot, and the whispering wind that carried both danger and hope. Ayita's eyes scanned the horizon constantly, reading the land with the precision of someone born to it, her hands moving with the grace and confidence of a warrior, guiding Silas through narrow passes, rocky outcrops, and hidden trails only she could see. Every step forward was a negotiation with the West itself, the land both ally and adversary, offering water and shelter one moment, and cliffs and hidden ravines the next. Silas had grown stronger, sharper, more attuned to the subtle signs of survival. Yet he felt a deep reverence for the girl who had taught him patience, vigilance, and the kind of courage that did not roar but endured. One evening, as the sun dipped below jagged peaks, painting the sky in blood-red hues, they stumbled upon smoke curling lazily from a distant valley. A sign of life, or danger, perhaps both. Silas's heart tightened. Bandits? Another group of hunters? Or something worse, waiting silently for travelers to falter? Ayita's hand rested lightly on his arm, steadying him, a silent signal to move with caution. As they approached, the smell of cooking fires mingled with the desert air, and shadows of horses flickered along the valley floor. They were not alone. A small settlement appeared, its structures rudimentary yet functional, and the inhabitants eyed them warily, hands hovering near weapons. Silas realized that even in survival, trust was fragile, and the West had a cruel way of testing it. The settlers approached, cautious words exchanged, and Aita translated, her voice calm, commanding, full of authority despite her youth. Tensions remained high, yet a tentative understanding formed. These people, like them, had endured the harshness of the land, and there was strength in alliance. Days were spent learning the settlement's routines, sharing skills, and forging bonds built on mutual respect and the necessity of survival. Silas felt the weight of responsibility deepen, not just for Aida, but for all those around them, understanding that leadership was forged in fire, patience, and decisive action. But the West never sleeps, and danger was never far behind. One night, under a crescent moon, the wind carried a distant echo of hooves, the unmistakable sign of pursuing threats. Silas and Aida prepared immediately, alerting the settlers, setting traps, and planning escape routes with precision. Hours later, a group of mercenaries descended upon the valley, their faces masked, eyes cold, and intent deadly. The battle that followed was chaotic, brutal, and relentless. Gunfire erupted, dust and smoke mingling with screams and the pounding of horses echoing against the surrounding cliffs. Silas felt every ounce of his strength tested, every lesson learned in the desert applied in real time. Aida moved with lethal grace, saving him more than once. Her presence a constant reminder that courage was not a solitary endeavor. It was shared, nurtured, and executed with trust. By dawn, the valley lay quiet, the mercenaries defeated or fled, leaving scars in the land and bodies alike. Exhausted, yet determined, Silas and Aida tended to the wounded, reflecting on the resilience of those who had survived and the bonds forged in battle. The following days brought more challenges: treacherous river crossings, unstable cliffs, and the ever-present threat of lawless men seeking gold, vengeance, or control. Each day tested not just their physical limits, but their emotional endurance. Yet they moved forward with unwavering determination. Along the way, Silas noticed subtle signs of life returning to the land: sprouting grass, flowing streams, and the cautious reappearance of wildlife. A reminder that even in the harshest conditions, hope endured. As they neared a plateau overlooking a vast valley, the realization hit them. The journey was not only about survival, but about creating a future. A place where bonds, trust, and courage could flourish beyond mere endurance. Aita's eyes sparkled with determination and promise, and Silas felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Understanding that the trials of the desert had forged not only resilience, but wisdom, foresight, and a capacity for hope that few ever experienced. Together, they planned, guided, and protected the small community, teaching skills, sharing knowledge, and fostering trust, transforming fear into strength and vulnerability into unity. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the harsh West began to yield to their perseverance. The mountains, the deserts, and the plains all bore witness to their journey, to their courage, and to the bond that had carried them through every trial. And as the sun set behind distant peaks, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Silas and Aita stood side by side, looking over a land they had tamed not through domination, but through courage, trust, and the quiet miracles of survival. The West was still wild, still dangerous, but in that moment, it also held promise, hope, and the undeniable proof that even in the harshest places, life, courage, and love could endure, flourish, and inspire those willing to face its trials head-on. The horizon burned with the first light of dawn as Silas and Aita rode through the rugged passes, their bodies tired, their minds sharpened by months of survival, danger, and hard-earned lessons. Every ridge, every bend in the canyon seemed alive, carrying the echoes of past struggles and whispers of challenges yet to come. The settlement behind them had grown stronger under their guidance, and though they had found some semblance of peace, the West remained a land of constant testing, a place where one misstep could mean death. Silas's eyes scanned the ridges with a mix of caution and determination, and Aita rode beside him, her senses alert, every instinct honed to perfection. They were no longer the vulnerable pair who had crossed the desert months ago. They had become legends in their own right, symbols of resilience, trust, and courage. Yet the past has a way of following even the most vigilant travelers. On the fourth day, smoke rose on the horizon, thin, curling, but unmistakable. Silas's pulse quickened. It was not the gentle warmth of a cooking fire. This was deliberate, a signal of pursuit or danger. As they drew closer, figures emerged, men on horseback, hardened faces, weapons glinting in the morning sun, riding with purpose and malice. The ultimate confrontation had arrived, a test of everything they had endured. Silas and Aita prepared instantly, scanning the terrain for advantage, studying the movements of the men, and calculating the risks. The battle began without warning, a brutal symphony of gunfire, shouts, and the thunder of hooves. Silas felt pain sear through his shoulder, but adrenaline sharpened his senses, and he moved with precision and instinct. Aita darted through the chaos like a shadow, her knife and rifle exact, protecting him, the settlement, and the fragile hope they had nurtured. Every strike, every dodge, every heartbeat was a testament to their growth, to the bond forged in fire, blood, and the relentless desert. The conflict raged across ridges and valleys, a dance of survival where the West itself seemed to hold its breath, watching which side would emerge victorious. Hours passed, the sun climbing high and burning mercilessly, yet neither Silas nor Aita faltered. The last of the attackers were driven back, their threats extinguished, leaving behind only the echoes of struggle, the scent of spent gunpowder, and the solemn understanding of how close they had come to losing everything. Silas looked at Aita, seeing not just the girl he had saved, but the force, the courage, and the spirit that had carried them through unthinkable trials. The desert, once a merciless teacher, now seemed almost reverent, as if acknowledging their survival, their bravery, and the strength of their connection. With the immediate threat vanquished, they returned to the settlement, where the people had begun rebuilding and thriving, inspired by the example of resilience that Silas and Aita had provided. Days turned into weeks, the harsh West softened by the bonds they had formed, the small victories they had earned, and the lessons that had been passed down. Silas trained the settlers in skills he had learned, and Aita shared the deep wisdom of her people, ensuring that every member could survive, protect, and prosper. Together, they forged a community capable of withstanding the cruelty of the land and the threat of men who would challenge them. Yet even in peace, the desert demanded respect. Silas often rode alone at dawn, watching the horizon, feeling the weight of the lessons learned, and reflecting on the transformation within himself. Aita's presence was constant, her laughter rare and precious, her counsel invaluable, and their partnership grew stronger with each passing day. As the sun set over the plateau one evening, bathing the valley in gold and crimson, Silas realized that the West, for all its danger and cruelty, had offered them something priceless. Not wealth, not power, but the chance to survive, to love, and to build something enduring. Together they had faced death, betrayal, and the merciless harshness of nature. Yet they had emerged, not only alive, but stronger, wiser, and bound to each other by trust and courage that would never fade. The final months saw the settlement flourish, crops growing where once there had been only dust, children laughing where silence had reigned, and the land slowly reclaiming itself from the scars of struggle. Silas and Aita rode through the valley, side by side, feeling the pulse of life returning to the West, knowing that their journey had forged something lasting, hope in a land that rarely offered it freely. And as night fell, stars blazing overhead, Silas whispered to Aita, "We survived the West together." And she smiled, eyes reflecting the endless sky, knowing that courage, trust, and small miracles had turned a barren desert into a home, a story, and a legacy that would endure beyond them, proving that even in the harshest lands, life could be reclaimed and hope could bloom against all odds. The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in gold and crimson, and Silas and Aita stood side by side, their hearts full, their spirits unbroken. The desert had tested them, the West had tried to claim them, yet they had endured, survived, and thrived. Around them, life bloomed where once there had been only dust. Laughter replaced silence, and the land itself seemed to breathe in relief. In that quiet moment, they understood the truth they had lived every day. Courage was stronger than fear, hope brighter than despair, and even in the harshest places, love, trust, and small miracles could carve out a life worth living. And as the stars shimmered overhead, the wind whispered a promise. They were home, together, and the story of survival, strength, and hope would echo in the West forever.